Some babysitting jobs end with bedtime stories and a clean paycheck. But others end with the sound of footsteps in an empty hallway. In tonight's video from High Scary Stories, you'll hear 8 true accounts of ordinary sitters who discovered the house wasn't as empty as it seemed. A man at the fence who never left. A voice from the basement when no one was home. A baby monitor picking up breathing that wasn't the baby's. These aren't urban legends. They're reports, police files, cold cases. If you've ever checked a locked door twice, this one's for you. Story 1. The man at the fence watched us for hours. I was 17 that summer, freshly out of high school, and stuck in a town that felt like it had nothing left to offer. My best friend had moved away, my boyfriend, and I had broken up 2 months earlier, and my parents were constantly working. So when Mrs. Carrington from 3 doors down asked if I could babysit her 2 kids for a few afternoons while she attended real estate meetings, I said yes, without hesitation. Their house was one of the nicest in the neighborhood. Tall windows, wraparound porch, a backyard that faced the edge of Lake Farewell. Everything about it felt calm, clean, and secure. And honestly, I needed the distraction. I figured a couple of hours watching cartoons, handing out snacks, and making sure no one stuck crayons in the air vents would be easy money. At least that was the plan. Until I saw the man standing by the fence. Just standing. Not moving. Watching. The Carringtons' house gave off that magazine cover kind of perfection. White wood siding, soft gray shutters, and a perfectly trimmed lawn that sloped down into a wide backyard lined with old oak trees. They had security cameras at every corner, motion lights near the patio, and a digital lock on every door. Inside, everything smelled like vanilla and lemon polish. There were cozy throw blankets, quiet jazz humming through hidden speakers, and neatly labeled snack bins in the pantry. Even the kids Lily and Marcus were calm and well-behaved, which felt almost suspicious for a 5- and 7-year-old. It was the kind of place where nothing bad ever seemed to happen. The backyard was the kids' favorite spot. There was a wooden play set with swings and a sandbox shaped like a boat. And beyond the trimmed grass, a short wooden fence that separated their property from the trees, leading down to Lake Farewell. Past that fence, everything turned wild and quiet. Just tall grass, thick woods, and the shimmer of water in the distance. I remember sitting on the patio that first afternoon, sipping lemonade, watching the kids chase each other barefoot through the sun. I almost believed the calm. Almost. Until I saw him again. He was there just beyond the fence, standing half in shadow beneath the trees. At first, I thought it was a neighbor, or maybe someone fishing near the lake. But he wasn't carrying anything. No rod, no cooler. He wasn't walking either. He was just standing, still as a statue, facing the backyard, facing us. I squinted against the light and tried to make out his features, but the branches made it hard to see. He wore dark clothes, maybe a hoodie and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. I looked away for a second, called out to Marcus to stop throwing mulch at his sister, and when I looked back, the man was gone. No sound, no movement. Just empty space where he had been. I told myself it was nothing. A jogger, a hiker, maybe a groundskeeper checking the trees. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't as alone as I thought. That evening, as I was helping the kids put their toys away, Lily looked up at me and said very quietly, "He comes sometimes when Daddy's not home." I froze. "Who comes?" She shrugged. "The man by the trees." Then she went back to tying her shoes like it was the most normal thing in the world. I knelt down beside Lily, trying to keep my voice light. "What do you mean, sweetheart? You've seen him before." She nodded without looking up. last week, and before that too. Mommy said not to talk about it. I glanced at Marcus, who was now sitting cross-legged in the grass, unusually quiet. Did you see him too? He gave a small nod, then added, he waves sometimes, but we're not supposed to wave back. My stomach twisted. Did your mom say who he was? Lily finally looked at me, her face serious in that strange, solemn way kids sometimes get. Mommy said he's just someone who used to live nearby, that he misses our house. That didn't make sense. The Carringtons had built this home only a few years ago. Brand new. I looked toward the fence again, the trees swaying gently. Nothing there, but now the silence behind it didn't feel peaceful. It felt like it was listening. That night, after I tucked the kids in and made sure the doors were locked, I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone, trying to shake off the unease. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel earned. It just hangs there like something's waiting. Around 9:30, I heard the doorbell ring. Not loud, just a single chime. I stood up slowly and peeked through the peephole. No one. I checked the porch camera from the Carringtons' tablet. The screen blinked once, then showed a blank feed. Error. I refreshed the app, but the feed was still black. The motion light near the front walkway flickered on and off, like it couldn't decide what it was seeing. I stepped back, heart thudding. I didn't want to wake the kids, so I moved quietly through the house, checking every lock again, even the sliding glass doors. Everything was shut tight. But when I looked out toward the backyard, I noticed something different. The patio light was off. I had turned it on earlier, I was sure of it. I opened the door just a crack and leaned out. That's when I saw it. One of the plastic chairs on the patio had been knocked over. And beside it, on the wooden deck, was a wet footprint. Just one. No rain. No puddle. Just one single print facing the house. I slammed the door, locked it, and closed every curtain. Something was out there. Or someone. Watching. Waiting. I backed away from the sliding door, heart pounding so loud I was sure it would wake the kids. I grabbed the cordless phone from the kitchen counter and carried it with me as I tiptoed up the stairs. I didn't want to scare Marcus and Lily, but I wasn't about to leave them sleeping alone either. I opened their door slowly. They were both asleep, small bodies, curled under thin blankets, breathing steady. For a second, I thought about letting them rest, pretending this was all in my head. But then I remembered the footprint, the camera glitch, the man in the trees. I gently woke them up, whispering that we were going to have a little camp out in Mommy's room. They didn't ask many questions, just followed me sleepily down the hall. I locked the bedroom door behind us and turned on the lamp by the bed. Then I moved a dresser in front of the door. My hands were shaking. I dialed Mrs. Carrington first, but it went to voicemail. Then I called my mom just to feel less alone, but didn't tell her everything. I didn't want to worry her. I was about to try the police when something made me glance at the baby monitor on the nightstand. I had turned it on without thinking, and its small screen showed a black and white image of the backyard. At the edge of the screen near the fence, a shape was moving. Slow, tall, unmistakably human. And it was walking toward the house. I didn't wait. I called the police, my voice shaking but clear. I gave them the address, told them someone was outside the house, possibly trying to break in. The dispatcher told me to stay calm, keep the door locked, and wait. I sat with the kids on the floor behind the bed, holding them close, whispering that everything would be okay, even though I wasn't sure I believed it. 10 minutes passed, then 15. I kept checking the monitor, but the figure had disappeared again. just vanished into the trees like before. When the doorbell rang again, I nearly jumped out of my skin. But this time, it was the police. I made sure it was really them and then opened the front door with shaking hands. 2 officers did a full sweep of the yard. They didn't find anyone, but they did find footprints, several circling the backyard, and one set near the kids' sandbox that led up to the fence, and then stopped. Beyond that, only trees. One officer said it looked like the person had been watching for a while. And there was something else, small scuff marks near the wooden playhouse, as if someone had crouched behind it, waiting. I didn't sleep at all that night. The Carringtons thanked me, paid me more than they should have, and said they'd review the footage. But I knew what I saw. And sometimes, late at night, I still think about that man standing just beyond the fence. How he never knocked, never spoke, never tried to break in. Because the scariest part was that he didn't need to force his way inside to terrify me. He just had to stand there and watch. Story 2. He said he was referred by my aunt. He lied. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I stopped by the gas station near my neighborhood to grab a snack after work. The summer heat in Missouri was heavy, and I was still in my wrinkled polo from my part-time job at the bookstore. I wasn't expecting anyone to speak to me, but as I reached for a bottle of iced tea, a man stepped beside me and said my name. "Jenna Wright?" he asked with a friendly smile. I froze. He looked to be in his mid-30s, clean-shaven, dressed like a contractor in a flannel shirt and work vest. "I'm a friend of your Aunt Linda," he said quickly. "She told me you're great with kids. I've been looking for a sitter last minute." My first instinct was hesitation, but his tone was relaxed, casual, like someone doing you a favor. He spoke fast, polite, as if we already knew each other. And that made it worse, because I had never seen this man before in my life. I forced a smile and asked, "Sorry, what did you say your name was again?" He laughed lightly and said, "Mark. I actually asked your aunt a few days ago if she knew anyone reliable. She mentioned you. Said you babysat for the Morgans before that part was true." I had watched the Morgan kids once or twice during high school, but I didn't remember ever meeting this guy. Still, the way he spoke, confident but not pushy, made me second-guess myself. "It's just a couple hours tonight," he continued. "My regular sitter canceled last minute. I've got a work thing I can't miss. It would mean a lot." I hesitated, but then he added $50 an hour. I blinked. That was way above normal. He pulled a folded slip of paper from his back pocket and handed it to me. "Here's the address." 8 o'clock. I nodded slowly, more out of confusion than agreement. It all felt too convenient, too polished. But the money was tempting, and I didn't have other plans. As he left the store, I stared at the paper in my hand, a knot tightening in my stomach. Something felt wrong. I just couldn't tell what yet. By 7:40 that evening, I was in my car driving toward the address he had given me. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement as I turned off the main road into an older part of town I didn't usually visit. The houses here were smaller, close together with overgrown lawns and paint peeling off faded siding. I slowed as I approached the house, pale green one-story, with a crooked mailbox and no car in the driveway. I parked on the curb and texted, "Hey, I'm outside." The reply came instantly. "Great. Come in. Side door's open." I got out of the car, slowly, heart beating faster. I walked past the front door and around to the side. The door there was slightly ajar. I knocked gently and called out, "Hello." No answer. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The air smelled stale like dust and something faintly sour. The house was dark except for a flickering lamp in the corner of the living room. The furniture looked old and mismatched, like it had been dragged in from a thrift store. Markina called again, my voice quieter this time. Still nothing, and no sign of a child anywhere. Just silence, thick and waiting. I took a hesitant step further into the living room, scanning for any signs of a child, a toy, a backpack, anything. But the place felt empty. No framed photos on the walls, no shoes by the door, no noise from a back room. Just that flickering lamp and a threadbare couch covered in dust. I glanced at the paper in my hand, again checking the address. It matched. My phone buzzed. A new message from Mark. He's probably playing in the basement. Go ahead and head down. I stared at the screen, then at the door near the kitchen that hung slightly open, revealing a steep set of wooden stairs leading down into darkness. My stomach clenched. I texted back, "Can you come up first?" No reply. Instead, another message appeared within seconds. Just go down. He's shy. Something about the phrasing, too quick, too controlled, made the hairs on my arms stand up. I took a step toward the basement door, then stopped. The light switch didn't work. I stood there frozen, staring into the black stairwell, and every instinct in my body screamed that I shouldn't be here, that I was not alone in this house, and whatever was waiting in that basement wasn't a child. I stepped back from the basement door, my breath catching in my throat. The silence in the house felt unnatural thick, like fog pressing against my skin. I texted again, fingers trembling, "Can you please come up first?" Still nothing. Then a third message appeared. "Don't waste time, just go down." My hands tightened around my phone. I turned toward the front of the house, debating whether to leave altogether when I heard it, a single slow creak from behind me. Not from the basement, from the hallway near the back bedrooms. I spun around, heart pounding in my ears. "Hello," I called, my voice breaking halfway through. No response. I backed toward the front door, trying to stay calm, trying to make sense of it. And then my phone buzzed again. A new message. "Why did you come if you weren't going to help?" My blood ran cold. I hadn't told him I was scared. I hadn't said I wasn't going down. I hadn't said anything. Another buzz. "You shouldn't have come alone." That was it. I turned and ran to the front door, but the lock jammed. I yanked hard, panicking. From the back of the house, I heard slow, deliberate footsteps. Closer, heavy, not rushing. I sprinted to the side door where I came in, shoved it open, and bolted across the lawn. I didn't stop running until I was back in my car with the doors locked and the engine roaring. My phone buzzed one more time. The message read, "Next time, don't ignore your gut." I sat in the driver's seat, hands shaking on the wheel, trying to catch my breath. My phone was still lit up with that last message. I stared at it, my heart racing. Then I remembered something he had said. He knew my Aunt Linda, that she referred me. I opened my contacts and dialed her number. It rang twice before she picked up. "Hey, sweetie," she said, casual as ever. "Aunt Linda," I blurted. "Do you know someone named Mark, mid-30s, said he's a friend of the Morgans?" There was a pause. "Mark? No, not really. I think someone by that name rented the house across from the Morgans last winter, but I never spoke to him." "Why?" My blood turned to ice. "He said you gave him my name for babysitting?" Silence. "Jenna, I never told anyone that. What's going on?" I told her everything. Every detail. As I talked, I pulled up the address he gave me on my phone's GPS again. But something was wrong. The house pin showed as empty land. I checked another map app, same thing. No registered residents, no known tenant. That house wasn't just abandoned. It had been foreclosed a year ago. My phone buzzed again. A private number. The message said, "You were smart. Most don't run." I didn't respond. I drove straight to the police station. Later, they searched the house. They found signs of forced entry. Someone had been squatting there. And in the basement, they found a flashlight still on and an old metal chair with ropes tied to the arms. In the weeks that followed, I replayed that night over and over in my mind, trying to make sense of how close I had come to something far worse. The police couldn't trace the number. It was from a burner phone long deactivated. No fingerprints in the house, no cameras nearby, nothing solid. Just a series of footprints in the basement, the chair, and those messages burned into my memory. Aunt Linda was shaken, and the Morgans didn't know him beyond a few passing waves. I stopped babysitting after that. Couldn't bring myself to walk into a stranger's house again, no matter how friendly they sounded. But what haunts me most isn't the messages or the empty house, it's the feeling that I was being watched long before he ever spoke to me. He didn't just find me by accident. He knew my name. He knew where I worked. And he waited for the exact moment I would say yes. And sometimes when I stop at that same gas station, I still catch myself glancing over my shoulder because the scariest part wasn't that he lied, but how easily I believed him. Story 3. He wasn't the plumber, and he wasn't alone. It was a Thursday afternoon in late September, and the kind of day where the air felt just cool enough to remind you that summer was over. I had agreed to babysit for a single mom named Mrs. Linton, who lived in a quiet row of townhouses just outside the city. I had watched her son Aiden a handful of times before he was 6 shy and obsessed with dinosaurs. Her place was simple but cozy, with cheerful drawings on the fridge and a small fenced backyard filled with plastic toys and a faded lawn chair. I arrived around 3:45 p.m., and she left shortly after, dressed for a meeting downtown. "Shouldn't be later than 8, she said with a tired smile. "Dinner's in the fridge, and the Wi-Fi password is on the counter." The afternoon passed peacefully. Aiden and I built a cardboard volcano, ate chicken nuggets, and settled down with a movie. The sun was setting, and a soft orange light spilled through the back window as I leaned on the arm of the couch, texting a friend. Nothing felt strange. Nothing felt wrong. Until someone knocked on the door. 3 sharp knocks. Not rushed, not hesitant. Just firm and exact. I looked through the peephole and saw a man holding a clipboard and wearing a tool belt. He looked like any ordinary contractor, mid-30s, scruffy beard, wearing jeans work boots, and a navy blue shirt with a company logo stitched above the pocket. The clipboard and tool belt completed the image. When I opened the door, slightly keeping the security chain on, he gave a quick, polite nod. "Hey there," he said. "I'm with Ridgeway Plumbing. We're doing free water pressure checks for the HOA today. Should only take a few minutes." I hesitated. Mrs. Linton didn't mention anything about that. He smiled like he'd heard that before. Totally understandable. Most residents aren't notified. We're just going door to door, checking for potential leaks. It's part of a promotion we're running. No cost, no sales pitch. I'll just need to check the water lines and fixtures real quick. He tapped his clipboard lightly, almost like it was scripted. Everything about him looked legitimate, but something about the way he stood too close to the door, or the fact that he didn't make eye contact, started to raise red flags. I told him I was just the babysitter and couldn't let anyone in. His smile tightened. "Well, maybe just a quick peek at the kitchen sink," he offered. I shook my head. "Sorry, not my house." He didn't argue. He just nodded, said fair enough, and turned to walk away. But I didn't close the door yet, because something felt off. As I watched the man walk down the steps, I noticed Aiden standing quietly behind me, his small hands gripping the edge of the hallway wall. He looked up at me and said in a hushed voice, "He came here before." I turned, startled. "What do you mean?" Aiden shifted nervously. "Last week, I saw him standing by the fence. Mommy was in the shower. He knocked but didn't say anything." I crouched to his level. "Did your mom open the door?" He shook his head. "She looked out the window and then told me to go to my room." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "You're sure it was the same man?" Aiden nodded slowly. "Same face, same tools." I looked back out the door. The man had reached the sidewalk but wasn't leaving. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, looking up at one of the neighboring windows, watching, waiting. And in that moment, I knew he wasn't with any plumbing company. I closed the door and slid the deadbolt into place, then double-checked the windows in the living room just to be sure. Aiden stood silently beside me, sensing my unease. I didn't want to scare him, but I also couldn't ignore the knot tightening in my stomach. I pulled out my phone and texted Mrs. Linton explaining that a plumber had stopped by claiming it was for the HOA. Her response came quickly. "We're not part of any HOA. Do not let anyone in." My chest tightened. I peeked through the curtain again. The man was still there now, pretending to examine something on his clipboard, but it was obvious he was stalling. I turned off the lights in the front of the house and guided Aiden into the kitchen. "Let's play a quiet game," I whispered. We sat at the far end of the room away from the windows. The minutes dragged. Eventually, I looked outside again, and the man was gone. No knock, no goodbye. Just gone. I wanted to believe that was the end of it. But the heaviness in my chest told me otherwise. He hadn't come to check the pipes. He came to see who would open the door. And I had the awful feeling this wasn't his first house. After an hour passed with no more knocks, I tried to settle things down. I made Aiden a small snack, and we watched the end of his movie with the lights off, curtains drawn. Around 8, I tucked him into bed, read a quick dinosaur book, and left the hallway light on for him. He didn't say much, but before I closed the door, he asked, "You'll still be here, right?" I nodded. "I'll be just downstairs." I turned on the baby monitor in the kitchen and took a seat on the couch, finally starting to relax. But just before 9, I heard it. A soft clicking sound from the kitchen, like something tapping metal. I froze. The baby monitor light flickered, then silence. I stood and crept toward the sound, expecting to find a branched or maybe a loose vent. Instead, I saw the crawlspace hatch in the kitchen floor cracked open an inch. I hadn't noticed it before it blended into the tile. I slowly knelt down, heart pounding, and pushed the door shut, locking it with a small metal latch. My hands were shaking. That's when I noticed the smell. A faint trace of sweat and something stale like old food. I opened the pantry out of instinct. On the floor behind a stack of paper towels were 2 empty granola bar wrappers. I hadn't been in there all day. I backed away, dread washing over me. Someone had been inside the house, not just today. For days. Quiet, hidden, close. And I had never seen them. I called the police without hesitation, my voice low, as I stood in the far corner of the kitchen, eyes fixed on the closed crawlspace door. I explained everything: the fake plumber, the wrappers, the smell, the strange hatch. The dispatcher stayed calm, told me to lock every door and wait upstairs until officers arrived. I grabbed Aiden from his room, carried him half asleep into the master bedroom, and locked the door behind us. He clung to me without a word, his little hands tight around my wrist. 10 minutes later, I heard the doorbell. and then the clear voice of an officer calling my name. I looked through the upstairs window and saw 2 marked cruisers outside. I opened the front door cautiously and explained everything again. They searched the crawl space first. It was just large enough for someone to lay down in. At the far end, wedged into the corner, they found a blanket, a half-empty bottle of water, and a phone cheap prepaid. One officer held it up with a grim look. Someone's been living in here. Then they found something else, a small camera hidden in a vent facing the living room, taped up, wired into a power bank. It hadn't just been someone hiding. They had been watching, recording, studying the rhythms of the house. Mrs. Linton arrived minutes later, in a panic, barely able to process what had been going on under her roof. The scariest part, the officer said, was that they couldn't tell when he came in, only that he hadn't left. Not through the front door, anyway. After securing the house, the officers began asking neighbors if they had seen anything unusual. One older woman across the street mentioned a man she'd noticed hanging around the townhouse complex at odd hours, always pretending to be checking meters or fixing things, always carrying the same clipboard. She hadn't thought much of it until now. The police ran the serial number from the hidden phone. It had no contacts, no texts, no calls. Just a series of video files, grainy clips of Mrs. Linton's living room, Aiden playing on the floor, and me walking past the kitchen sink, yawning, stretching, completely unaware. The last video was recorded an hour before I found the wrappers, and it was still recording. The man wasn't a plumber. He wasn't a stranger passing through. He had been there for days, maybe longer, watching from beneath the floor, waiting for the right moment. And I almost gave it to him. Since that night, I've never walked into a house, any house, without first checking the closets, the vents, and especially the floor. Because the worst kind of danger isn't the one that breaks in. It's the one that's already inside, waiting for you to forget it's there. Story 4, he asked to use the phone. The sun had just started to dip behind the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the dry dirt fields that surrounded my uncle's ranch. It was quiet, the kind of silence you only get in the middle of nowhere, broken only by the soft creak of the windmill and the occasional whinny from the barn. I was 17 and spending the weekend watching my younger cousins while my aunt and uncle attended a wedding a few hours north. It wasn't my first time babysitting at the ranch, and I honestly enjoyed the peace. No traffic, no buzzing phones, no one around for miles. The kids, Mia and Lucas, were easy. At 7 and 9, they mostly entertained each other with board games and chasing the barn cats. After dinner, I let them watch a cartoon while I sat on the porch swing with a glass of lemonade, listening to the wind move through the grass. The screen door creaked behind me as I leaned back and looked out at the empty road that stretched off into the hills. Everything felt still and ordinary. The kind of ordinary that settles deep into your bones. But less than an hour later, that quiet would be shattered by 3 knocks at the front door and a man who was too polite to trust. It was just after 8 when I heard the first knock. Not loud, not urgent, 3 steady taps that echoed through the wooden frame of the house. I got up slowly, figuring it might be a neighbor or someone from down the road needing directions. But when I opened the inner door and looked through the screen, a man I didn't recognize was standing on the porch. He looked to be in his late 30s, dusty boots, jeans, and a flannel shirt rolled to the elbows. A ball cap shaded most of his face, but I could see enough to notice the slight smile. "Evening," he said, nodding once. "Sorry to bother you, but my truck broke down about a mile back. No signal out here. Any chance I could use your phone real quick?" His voice was calm, polite, even friendly. I didn't open the screen door. Something about him felt too comfortable, like he had rehearsed this line before. "I can call someone for you," I offered. He hesitated just a second too long, then smiled again. "Nah, it's fine. I just need a quick call." I kept my hand near the lock. His tone never shifted, but his eyes, they never stopped scanning past me into the house. Before I could respond, I felt a tug on my shirt. It was Mia standing barefoot behind me, eyes wide. She leaned in close and whispered, "That's the man I saw earlier." I glanced down, startled. "What do you mean?" I whispered back. "He was by the barn," she said softly. "He was just standing there this afternoon. I didn't tell you because I thought he was one of Uncle Ray's friends." My stomach dropped. I turned back toward the man on the porch. He was still smiling, still waiting, like he wasn't in any hurry at all. I nodded once, forcing a polite tone. "Give me a second," I said through the screen, then gently pulled Mia back inside. My hand was shaking as I picked up the house phone. I wasn't calling a tow truck. I was calling the sheriff, because this man wasn't lost. He wasn't surprised. He was already too familiar with this place. I dialed the sheriff's office with one hand while keeping my eyes on the door. The dispatcher answered quickly, and I gave her the address, explaining that a man was outside claiming car trouble. But something didn't feel right. "Stay inside," she said firmly. "We have a deputy 15 minutes out. Keep the doors locked." I thanked her quietly and hung up just as the man knocked again, twice this time, a little louder. "Hey," he called through the screen, still in that same pleasant voice. "I don't mean to be a bother, just wondering if I could come in to wait. It's getting cold out here." I didn't answer. I backed away from the door, locking the deadbolt. From the window, I watched him tilt his head like he was confused. Then he stepped off the porch, but didn't leave. Instead, he walked slowly around the front yard, glancing up at the window's hands in his pockets. Like he was taking his time, like he knew he still had a chance. That smile never left his face. I pulled Mia and Lucas into the hallway, keeping them close. This wasn't a man who needed help. This was a man testing how far he could go before someone made him stop. I closed every curtain in the house, double-checked the locks, and turned off the porch lights to make it harder for him to see inside. The kids followed me without a word, sensing that something was wrong, even if they didn't fully understand. We sat in the hallway, backs against the wall, as I held the cordless phone tight in my hand. Every creak of the wood, every gust of wind outside made me flinch. I checked the front window again. The man was gone. The yard looked empty, peaceful even, but it felt like a lie. I didn't dare open the door or step outside. Instead, I crept into the kitchen to check the back door, and that's when I noticed the motion light above the barn had switched on. Someone was moving out there. My heart jumped. I turned off the kitchen light and crouched low, peeking through the side window. A shadow moved near the fence, too tall to be any of the neighbors. I moved fast, gathering the kids, and locking us in the bathroom, the only room without windows. The deputy was still 10 minutes away, and I didn't know where the man had gone. Only that he hadn't left, and that now he knew we were scared. We huddled in the bathroom, the only sound coming from the ticking wall clock and the distant groan of wind outside. I kept the cordless phone gripped, tight eyes locked on the doorknob. Every few seconds, I strained to hear any footstep, any creak, but the house had gone eerily still. Then, without warning, a light tap echoed from the back door. One soft knock, then silence. I held my breath. The kids were curled up beside the tub, Mia clutching her brother's hand. The knock didn't come again. But a moment later, I heard the barn door creak open, then close. Slow and steady, he was moving, circling, watching. I whispered into the phone, asking the dispatcher how far out the deputy was. 2 minutes, she said. Stay where you are. That's when the front porch light flickered back on. I moved to the hallway window just enough to peek through the edge of the curtain. He was standing there again, this time with no smile, just staring at the door. He didn't knock. He didn't speak. He just stood still, like he belonged there. The patrol car pulled in seconds later. The man didn't run. He simply turned and walked into the field, disappearing into the tall grass like smoke. The deputy chased after him. But the man vanished into the open land behind the property, leaving no footprints, no tracks, just the distant sway of grass. When they searched the area the next morning, they found something worse, a campsite hidden beneath the trees a few hundred yards away. Inside there were food wrappers, a stained blanket, and a notebook filled with sketches of the ranch house. Drawings of windows, entries like 2 kids' teenage girl and the times when lights turned off. He hadn't just stumbled onto the property that night. He had been watching us for days, maybe longer. And ever since that night, I've never opened the door to a stranger with a smile, because the most dangerous people don't force their way in. They wait for you to feel sorry enough to let them. Story 5. I thought it was the wind. Then I saw him at the window. The snow had been falling steadily since morning, covering everything in a soft white hush. I was house-sitting and babysitting at the same time, a favor from my mom's coworker who had taken her husband to a wedding out of state. Their home was in a quiet Vermont town, tucked between pine trees and frozen hills, the kind of place that felt safe just because it was so far from anything else. The house was warm, full of soft rugs, old wood, and the scent of cinnamon from a candle someone had left burning on the kitchen table. I had been asked to watch their 8-year-old daughter Emily for one night. It didn't seem like a big deal. She was sweet, quiet, spent most of her time reading or drawing. I had brought a book, some snacks, and planned to enjoy a peaceful evening while the snowstorm kept the rest of the world away. By 6, it was already dark. Emily was curled up on the couch, drawing silently as the wind howled outside. I checked the doors, made sure the fireplace was off, and got ready to settle in. I thought I was alone in the house with a child in a storm. I was wrong. Something else was already there, around 7:15, just as Emily was finishing her hot chocolate, and I had settled into the armchair. With my book, the lights flickered once. Then everything went dark. The house groaned as the heat shut off, and the quiet hum of electricity vanished. "It's probably the storm," I said, trying to sound calm, though my stomach tightened. Emily didn't panic. She just looked at me and asked softly, "Do we have candles?" I found a few in a drawer and lit them, placing them around the living room. The soft glow made everything feel smaller, more enclosed. I checked my phone, no signal. The landline didn't work either. I texted Emily's parents just in case, though I doubted the message would go through. We sat together in the flickering light shadows dancing on the walls. Outside, the wind picked up whistling through the trees. Then faintly, I heard something different. A soft tap. I looked at the front window. Nothing. I told myself it was the wind. But deep down, I already knew it wasn't. Emily tugged gently at my sleeve, her voice barely above a whisper. "He comes when the lights go out," she said, staring at the darkened window. I froze. "What do you mean?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She didn't look at me. Last winter, when it snowed like this, I saw him, standing right there, by the back window. I told Mommy, but she said it was just the wind. But I know what I saw. My skin prickled. I wanted to reassure her, say it was just her imagination. But the way she said it with calm certainty, not fear, made something sink in my chest. I walked to the kitchen and checked the back window. Nothing. Just the reflection of candlelight against the glass. I turned to leave. And that's when I heard it again. A tap, this time on the side window. Too precise, too rhythmic to be the wind. Emily hadn't moved. She just whispered, "He's here again." I moved slowly toward the side window, my breath catching with every step. The candlelight didn't reach that part of the house well, and the hallway felt colder, like the air itself was holding its breath. I hesitated a few feet from the glass, then stepped closer and leaned slightly to look outside. At first, I saw nothing, just darkness and snow falling steadily in the beam of the porch light. But then, just as I turned to walk away, I saw it. A face. Pale, expressionless, almost pressed to the glass. I stumbled back, my heart lurching. The face was gone in an instant, like it had been waiting for me to look before vanishing into the night. I ran back to the living room, grabbing Emily and pulling her close. "We're going upstairs," I whispered, trying not to show panic. We hurried to the master bedroom and locked the door behind us. I pulled the dresser in front of it just in case. Emily didn't ask questions. She sat on the bed, legs crossed, like this was something she had expected. "He never comes inside," she said softly. "But he watches. He always watches." I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, clutching a fireplace poker, watching the snow and waiting. When the sun finally broke through the clouds the next morning, the snow was still falling. But the light brought a false sense of safety. I waited until I was sure Emily was asleep, then quietly moved the dresser and crept downstairs. The power was still out, and the silence in the house felt heavy, unnatural. I opened the front door slowly and stepped onto the porch, my boots crunching in the fresh snow. I scanned the yard, the trees, the long stretch of white that surrounded the house. Nothing seemed disturbed. But then I looked down and my blood ran cold. Footprints. A clear set of them leading from the tree line to each window of the house. They circled it, paused by the side window, the back, even the second-story window beneath the master bedroom. I followed the tracks around to the backyard. They didn't lead back to the woods. They stopped behind the shed. I braced myself and pulled open the shed door. Empty. Just tools and bags of rock salt. But the snow inside was disturbed. Someone had been there watching. Hiding? Waiting? I didn't know how long he had stood outside. I only knew he never knocked. He didn't need to. He knew we were already afraid. I backed away from the shed, locking it with trembling hands before rushing inside. Emily was awake now, sitting at the top of the stairs, her face pale. I didn't bother explaining. I grabbed my phone again, still no signal. But the homeowners had mentioned a backup emergency satellite phone stored in the hallway cabinet in case of snowstorms. I tore through the shelves until I found it, powered it on, and waited through the painfully slow connection. When the line finally clicked, I gave our location, described the night's events and the tracks in the snow. The operator's tone shifted immediately. "Do not go outside again," she instructed. "A local unit is en route ETA 30 minutes. Stay inside. Lock everything." I did just that, checking every window, every door. Emily followed me silently, her small hand never leaving mine. As we sat back upstairs behind the barricaded bedroom door, I noticed something chilling on the hallway wall, a crayon drawing. One I hadn't seen last night. A figure tall and thin, standing in front of a house with no face and no eyes. Just a dark shape outlined in black. "Emily," I asked slowly, "when did you draw this?" She looked at me and said, "I didn't. He did." My heart dropped. "What do you mean he did?" I asked, barely able to get the words out. Emily tilted her head, her voice steady. "Last night, when you were sleeping in the chair, he came inside. He was quiet, but I saw him." My chest tightened. "Emily, the doors were locked." She nodded. "He came through the wall." I stared at her, trying to make sense of it, clinging to logic, but the drawing still sat there, fresh crayon marks, still waxy, not smudged. I hadn't drawn it. Emily hadn't. And we were the only two in the house, unless something else had been with us. Something that didn't care about locks or walls or rules. A police cruiser pulled into the driveway moments later, its tires crunching over the snow. But I couldn't stop staring at that drawing. The black figure had added something new. A second house. My house. And now, every night, when the wind howls and the lights flicker, I check the windows, not for what might be outside, but for what might already be inside watching. Story 6. He said he was the uncle. The kids said they'd never met him. It was supposed to be a quick job, just a few hours of babysitting for a family my sister knew from church. The Harpers had 2 kids, Liam and Zoe, ages 7 and 5, and they lived in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes from town. Their regular sitter had canceled last minute, and my sister volunteered me without hesitation. I arrived around 5 p.m. on a Thursday. The parents were warm, grateful, and in a rush. "They've had dinner," the mom said, grabbing her coat. "Bedtime's at 8. We'll be back by 9. Simple enough. The kids were sweet, a little shy, but nothing unusual. After the parents left, we played board games and watched cartoons. Around 7, just as I was about to start getting them ready for bed, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and saw a man mid-40s, clean-shaven, wearing a dark jacket and holding a small duffel bag. He smiled at the doorbell camera and waved. I opened the door slightly, keeping the chain on. "Can I help you?" I asked. He smiled again and said, "Yeah, I'm their uncle. Just got into town. Their mom said I could drop by." Behind me, Liam and Zoe stood frozen. Then Liam whispered, "We don't have an uncle." I kept my hand on the door, suddenly alert. "Hold on," I said through the crack. "Let me call their mom to check." His smile faded just slightly. She said she might not pick up. Bad reception at the conference center. That made my stomach tighten. I didn't say anything more. Just closed the door gently and locked it. Then I turned to the kids. "Go upstairs," I said quietly. "Start brushing your teeth, okay?" They obeyed without a word, clearly unsettled. I waited until they were out of sight, then peeked out the window. The man was still standing there, not moving, just staring at the house. I drew the curtains. My phone still had a signal. I called Mrs. Harper, straight to voicemail. I texted her. No reply. I told myself there had to be a logical explanation, maybe a miscommunication. But the way Liam said it, calm, certain, "We don't have an uncle," echoed in my mind as I double-checked every lock in the house. 10 minutes passed, then 15. I thought maybe he had left. I even peeked through the upstairs blinds, but the porch was empty. I exhaled slowly, trying to shake the tension. I sat with the kids in the living room, pretending to scroll through my phone, trying to act normal. That's when we heard it. A soft knock, not on the front door, but on the back. I stood up instantly. The back entrance was through the kitchen, facing the yard and alleyway. No one had any reason to be back there. I walked slowly, my footsteps silent. The kitchen light was off, so I stayed in the shadows, peering through the thin curtain covering the glass. He was there, the same man, same duffel bag, same calm expression, as if this was just a casual drop by. Except now he was pointing at the back lock. Not knocking, just pointing. I backed away from the door. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he might hear it. I turned off the rest of the lights in the house, grabbed the cordless phone, and told the kids in a whisper to go to the bathroom and lock themselves inside. "He's not their uncle," Liam whispered again. "But he used to come to the fence at night." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean he used to come to the fence?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Liam looked up at me, his face pale. "He used to stand there at night and watch our windows. Mommy told us not to talk about it. Said he was just sick and would go away if we ignored him." My skin prickled with cold dread. This wasn't some innocent misunderstanding. I grabbed my phone and called 911. I gave the dispatcher the address, described the man, and explained that the kids said he wasn't family. "Officers are on the way," the voice said firmly. "Stay where you are. Do not confront him." I checked the locks again, moved a chair under the front doorknob, and waited. But I couldn't stop thinking about one thing: if their parents knew who this man was, why hadn't they told me anything? Or better yet, why hadn't they warned the kids? The knocking stopped. Then silence. I waited frozen, trying to hear past the pounding in my chest. Minutes passed. I inched toward the front window and pulled the curtain back just enough to see. He was standing at the edge of the yard now, near the tree line. Not leaving, just watching. I couldn't take it anymore. Maybe it was adrenaline or panic, but I grabbed the porch light switch and flipped it on. Then I opened the door just wide enough to step out onto the porch. "You need to leave." Now, I called out. He didn't move, didn't speak, just raised one hand slowly like a wave, but there was no warmth in it. "The police are coming," I said louder this time. Still, he stood there. "They'll be here any minute." At that, he turned his head slightly. Not toward me, but toward the window upstairs. Toward where the kids were hiding. Then finally, he backed away. Step by step into the dark, until the shadow swallowed him. I locked the door again and pressed my back against it. I had confronted him, but somehow, it didn't feel like it was over. It felt like something had just begun. I didn't move from the door for at least 5 minutes. Every sound in the house felt louder, every floorboard creak, every gust of wind outside. I called the police again, just to make sure they were still coming. The dispatcher assured me a unit was close. I went upstairs and found Liam and Zoe still locked in the bathroom. Their faces were pale but calm, in that eerie way kids sometimes are when they've seen too much. I told them to stay there and return to the front room, heart still pounding. That's when I noticed the duffel bag. It was sitting on the porch. I hadn't seen him leave it. I didn't even hear it being dropped. I stared at it through the peephole, unsure what to do. Every instinct told me not to touch it, but I had to know. I grabbed a broom from the kitchen, unlocked the door, and pulled it inside carefully. The bag was unzipped halfway. Inside, I saw 3 things: a camera, a notebook, and dozens of printed photos, some of the kids playing in the yard, others of the Harper house taken from across the street. One photo made my blood run cold. It was taken through a window, from inside the house, and I was in it. Sitting on the couch just hours ago looking at my phone, which meant he had already been inside before I even opened the door. I dropped the duffel bag like it burned my hands. Just then, headlights swept across the living room window, red and blue flashing against the walls. I ran to the door and opened it before they even knocked. 2 officers stepped inside, calm but alert. I explained everything about the man, the kid's reaction, the notebook, the photos. One officer gently took the duffel bag using gloves. The other asked to speak with the children. Liam and Zoe came downstairs quietly. When the officer asked about the man, Liam simply said he used to stand by the fence. Zoe nodded, holding her brother's hand. One officer went outside to search the property, while the other stayed with us. 20 minutes later, they returned. We found fresh tracks leading into the woods, he said. But he's gone. We'll have a unit patrol the area overnight. You all did the right thing. I thanked them, but my hands were still shaking. One officer paused before leaving. This wasn't random, he said. That bag wasn't meant to be found. You interrupted something. As they drove away, I realized what scared me most. He had been close enough to take pictures from inside. And if I hadn't opened the door, what would he have done next? Since that night, I've learned the scariest intruders don't break windows. They earn your trust just long enough for you to unlock the door yourself. Story 7. The baby monitor picked up breathing. We had only lived in the house for 3 weeks. It was older, quiet, nestled at the end of a wooded cul-de-sac, just what we were looking for after leaving the city behind. My wife had fallen in love with the wraparound porch, and I was drawn to the sense of peace the place seemed to offer. Our daughter Lily, only 6 months old, had been adjusting well. She slept through most nights, and we kept a baby monitor next to our bed just in case. That night started like any other. We had dinner, watched a movie, and went to bed around 10. I checked the doors, turned off the lights, made sure the monitor was on, and set to full volume. Lily had been asleep for almost 2 hours by then. The house was still the kind of still that feels protective. I climbed into bed and dozed off quickly. But sometime after midnight, I woke up. Not to crying, not to noise, but to silence that felt wrong. I glanced at the monitor. The screen showed the crib empty. Then, without warning, a soft sound crackled through the speaker. It wasn't static. It wasn't Lily. It was breathing. Slow, steady, and unmistakably adult. At first, I thought it was a glitch. The monitor was old second-hand from a friend, and occasionally made odd noises when the signal dropped. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and stared at the screen again. The camera view hadn't changed. The crib was still empty. I whispered to my wife, half hoping she'd wake and tell me Lily was in our bed, or that she had gotten up for a feeding and I'd simply forgotten. But she was sound asleep, her breathing slow and deep. I picked up the monitor and turned up the volume. The breathing grew clearer. Slow inhales, slower exhales, rhythmic, adult. My heart was pounding now. I got out of bed and moved down the hallway toward Lily's room. Every step felt longer than the last. I reached for the doorknob, paused, then pushed the door open. The room was dark but peaceful. The nightlight cast a warm, amber glow across the crib. And there she was, Lily lying there, eyes closed, chest rising and falling. But the monitor in my hand still played the same breathing. I lowered it to check if it was picking up mine. It wasn't. Because I was holding my breath, I backed out of the room slowly, eyes never leaving Lily as she slept peacefully. Once I was in the hallway, I closed the door gently and stared at the monitor again. The breathing was still there. But now, it was layered with something else. An intermittent clicking sound like fingernails tapping on plastic. I walked back to our bedroom and set the monitor down on the dresser. I turned it off, then on again. Static. No video feed, no sound. For a moment, I felt a strange sense of relief. Maybe it really was just a glitch. Maybe some interference from a neighbor's baby monitor or a stray frequency. But when I powered it on again a few minutes later, the image returned clear, crisp, and still. The crib, empty again. The video feed was frozen. That's when it hit me. It wasn't a live feed anymore. I rushed back to Lily's room. She was still there, fast asleep, safe. I looked around the room for the camera. It was mounted where I had left it. But something about it felt wrong. I stepped closer and saw the small red recording light blinking. I hadn't turned it on to record. And that's when I noticed it was pointed slightly off. Not at the crib, but at the closet. I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the blinking red light on the camera. My first instinct was denial. Maybe I bumped it earlier. Maybe the angle was just slightly off. But no, the lens wasn't centered on the crib at all. It was aimed just to the left, directly at the closed closet door. I didn't open it. Not yet. I took the monitor back to our room and connected it to my laptop. The camera had a micro SD card for recording, and if it had been capturing footage, I needed to see what it saw. I scrolled through the files, each time stamped. Most were empty loops of Lily sleeping. But then, at exactly 12:11 a.m., the same moment I had heard the breathing, I saw a clip labeled automatically by the system. I clicked play. The footage showed the crib empty just as I had seen. Then something moved. Not in the crib, from the closet. Slowly the door creaked open just a few inches. A hand emerged, pale, long-fingered, barely visible in the dim light. Then, nothing. No figure stepped out. Just the door opening slightly and then closing again a few seconds later. The recording ended. My mouth went dry. The angle hadn't changed by accident. Something had adjusted the camera, not to monitor the baby, but to capture that door. I glanced across the hallway toward Lily's room. I hadn't checked the closet. I had only looked at her. And suddenly, every second I waited felt like a second stolen. I grabbed a flashlight and a kitchen knife before heading back to Lily's room. My hands were slick with sweat, but my grip was tight. Every creak in the floor sounded amplified. Every shadow along the hallway felt like it was watching me. I eased the door open. Lily was still sleeping soundly, untouched by the tension crawling under my skin. The closet stood silent in the corner, its door shut, as if nothing had ever moved. I walked over slowly, heart pounding in my throat. With one hand on the knob and the other holding the knife steady, I yanked the door open. Empty. Just boxes of baby clothes, some toys, and a stack of diapers. No sign of anything or anyone. But the space felt off. I tapped the walls. Solid. Then the floor. Hollow. I pulled away the boxes and noticed a cut in the carpet. A square cleanly sliced. I peeled it back and found a panel. It lifted easily. Underneath was a narrow crawl space. I stared down into it, unable to see more than blackness. My paranoia turned to certainty. Someone had been down there, was maybe still down there. And they had watched my daughter sleep. I knelt beside the hidden panel, heart hammering, as I shined the flashlight into the crawl space below. The beam cut through the dust, revealed a narrow tunnel barely wide enough for someone to slither through. It ran beneath the floorboards, disappearing into darkness. The air that rose from it was stale cold and smelled faintly of mildew and something metallic. I didn't want to go in, not with Lily asleep just feet away, but I also couldn't leave it unchecked. Instead, I closed the panel, pulled the dresser in front of the closet, and quietly carried Lily to our room. My wife woke as I laid her down and whispered what I'd found. She didn't ask questions, just held Lily close and nodded. We locked the bedroom door and called the police. While we waited, I watched the monitor again. This time the feed was live. Lily's crib, now empty, stared back at me. No movement, no sound. But my skin prickled as I noticed something unsettling, tiny scratches on the inside of the crib railing. Not from Lily. They were too high, too deliberate, as if someone had reached in or tried to pull themselves out. I didn't sleep. I just watched and waited. The officers arrived just after 3 a.m., quiet but alert. I led them straight to Lily's room and pointed to the closet, then pulled the carpet back to reveal the crawl space. One of them crouched, shined a light in, and muttered something to his partner. Within minutes, backup was called. They found old blankets tucked into a corner of the tunnel, a few wrappers, and something worse, a disposable phone with recent call logs and a small rusted folding knife. The tunnel led to a hatch in the floor of the abandoned house behind ours. Whoever had been watching us hadn't just slipped in at once. He had been living there, hidden beneath our home, moving through that narrow passage like a shadow. One officer turned to me and said in a low voice, "This wasn't random. He knew your routine. And he wasn't just watching your daughter. He was waiting." Since that night, I've never trusted silence in my home, because the scariest sounds aren't the ones you hear, but the ones that wait to breathe until you're asleep. Story 8. They left me with the twins, and someone was already inside. It was supposed to be a simple favor. My sister and her husband had an emergency out of town, and I agreed to watch their twin girls, Emily and Grace, for the weekend. I hadn't spent much time with kids, but I figured 2 quiet nights in their suburban home wouldn't be too hard. The girls were 5 years old, polite, and eerily calm for their age. When I arrived, they were already in their pajamas watching a cartoon in the living room. My sister gave me a quick rundown of bedtime routines, emergency numbers, and the security system. Before leaving, she hugged me tight and said, "If they say something strange, just humor them. They've been through a lot since we moved in." I didn't ask questions. I assumed she meant the adjustment to a new school or maybe night terror. The house was neat and modern, a bit too quiet. After tucking the girls in, I poured a glass of water and settled on the couch with my book. Around 10, the baby monitor crackled. I leaned over to check it. One of the twins sat up in bed and whispered, "He's back again. He's watching from the hallway." My stomach dropped because I hadn't heard anyone come in. I tried to shake it off as a dream. Kids say strange things, especially at night. But something about her tone stuck with me. The next morning was perfectly normal. The twins woke up cheerful, ate their cereal, and played in the backyard while I sipped coffee from the porch. Sunlight filled the house, and for a few hours, the memory of that whisper faded into the background. I asked them casually at lunch about the night before. Emily looked up and said, "He doesn't like being talked about. He gets mad." Grace just nodded, her eyes focused on the spoon in her hand. I laughed nervously and changed the subject. That afternoon, we painted with watercolors and watched cartoons. Everything was calm, almost boring. But every so often, one of the girls would glance toward the hallway by the stairs. Not scared, just expectant. Like someone was supposed to be there. Someone they already knew. After dinner, I gave the twins some paper and crayons while I cleaned up the kitchen. They were unusually quiet, focused. When I finally walked over to see what they'd drawn, my breath caught. Emily had sketched the outline of their bedroom, 2 beds, a window, and a tall black figure standing in the doorway. His arms were too long, and where the face should be, she had scribbled hard, dark circles. Grace's drawing was worse. It showed the same man, but inside the room this time, crouched beside one of the beds. Next to it, she'd written in shaky letters, "He comes after lights out." I tried to laugh it off, asked if they saw that in a movie or something, but they just stared at me. He doesn't like when we talk about him, Emily whispered again. Grace added softly, he hides when grown-ups look, but he watches when you sleep. I took the drawings, folded them quickly, and told them it was time for bed. But that night, I didn't read them a story. I didn't even turn the lights off. I sat outside their room with the hallway light on, gripping my phone. And every few minutes, I swore I heard footsteps above me, though no one ever went upstairs. The next morning, I couldn't ignore it anymore. As soon as the girls started watching cartoons, I grabbed the tablet that controlled the home security system. My sister had mentioned cameras, one in the hallway, one in the twins' room, and one in the backyard. I pulled up the footage from the night before, heart pounding. At first, nothing seemed unusual, just the two girls sleeping soundly in their beds. The timestamp clicked past midnight. At 12:47 a.m., the hallway light flickered once, then again. Then movement. A shape stepped into frame at the far end of the hallway. Not walking, just slowly leaning forward from the edge of the wall, as if peeking around the corner. I froze the video. The shape was tall, unnaturally thin, its head tilted too far to the side. Then the screen glitched. When the image returned, the hallway was empty. I rewound, played it again, but the figure was gone like it never existed. I switched to the twins' room feed, scrubbing the timeline. At 1:12 a.m., the crib camera caught something chilling. Emily sat up in bed, eyes wide open, and simply whispered, "I told you." He watches. Then she laid back down, not frightened, just used to it. I didn't tell the girls what I saw. I didn't even call my sister. Something about the whole thing felt too fragile, like naming it out loud might break whatever thin wall was keeping it away from us. Instead, I spent the afternoon inspecting every inch of the house. I checked windows, locks, crawl spaces, even the attic hatch. Nothing. No signs of forced entry, no hidden doorways, no broken screens. But the girls kept drawing, kept whispering. At one point, Grace came to me with a new picture. This time, the man was standing outside the front door, one hand pressed against the glass. Written underneath in blocky letters, "He wants to come in." I asked her gently when she started seeing him. She just said, "Since the first night in this house." Emily added, "Mommy and Daddy don't see him, but we do. He's lonely." That word chilled me. Lonely. Like he wasn't trying to hurt them, just waiting to be noticed. That night, I decided to stay awake. I set up the hallway camera feed on the tablet and curled up on the couch, lights on every door locked. Around 2:00 a.m., the living room got cold, unnaturally cold. The tablet buzzed, movement detected. I opened the live feed. The hallway was empty, but then slowly, the camera adjusted its focus. A shadow moved across the floor just out of frame, just enough to remind me I was not alone. The next morning, still running on adrenaline and half a night's sleep, I decided to check the one place I hadn't dared the day before, the attic. The girls were in the backyard, playing under the sun like nothing had happened, while I stood in the upstairs hallway staring at the small square hatch in the ceiling. I grabbed a step stool, pulled the cord, and the panel creaked open. A faint smell of dust and something sour drifted down. I climbed up slowly, heart racing with every step. The attic was cramped and dark, filled with insulation, old boxes, and forgotten junk. But in the far corner near the ventilation shaft, I found something that didn't belong. A small makeshift bed, blankets, food wrappers, and an empty water bottle. Someone had been living up there. Not recently, currently. The blankets were warm. There was a notebook, 2 pages filled with childlike drawings. The same figure the girls had drawn, long limbs, hollow eyes. One page had a chilling message, "She's mine now. Don't take her." I backed down the ladder so fast I almost fell. I slammed the hatch shut, locked the door to the hallway, and called the police. I didn't know who he was, but I knew now he hadn't just been watching. He'd been living above them the entire time. While waiting for the police to arrive, I kept the twins close, locking all doors and windows. I didn't tell them what I'd found. I just said we were playing a quiet game where everyone had to stay in one room. But as we sat huddled in the living room, I heard a faint thump from upstairs, then another. The attic hatch creaked. My breath caught. I grabbed a fire poker from beside the fireplace and positioned myself between the girls and the hallway. The police sirens were still minutes away. Suddenly, the hallway camera still open on the tablet went dark. Static. Then the feed returned, only now it showed the attic ladder fully extended. Someone had come down. I turned toward the hallway just in time to see a tall shadow pass by the doorway, slowly, deliberately. A whisper drifted through the air. "You shouldn't have found me." I held my ground, praying help would come in time. Since that night, I never babysit without checking the attic first, because the scariest monsters aren't the ones you invite in, but the ones already waiting above you. Thank you for venturing into the darkness with us. If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't keep the fear to yourself. Leave a comment, smash that like button, and share this video with someone who dares to listen in the dark. We release terrifying true stories every week, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's lurking in the shadows. This is High Scare Stories, where nightmares don't end when the video does. Until next time, stay safe and stay scared.